Alright, so this video is as much for Dad as it is for Rob, probably more for Dad actually. So this is the assembly for the gear shift mechanism. Kind of goes like this. The selector goes in here, like that, and like that. Anyway, the gear shifter, which is right here, which has these detents that you select with your foot, drives this little pin. That little pin rides in this circle, and it pushes. If you advance the gear, it puts a little pressure until it pops into the gear. There's a couple problems here. Over time, this spring has gotten lax, and this, when it's in neutral, it's like this. When it's in first, I think it's like this, and then when it's fully advanced all the way this way to put it into second gear. This is the high gear. This is the low gear, and then I think maybe in the middle is the neutral ride. So anyway, if you take this out, there's a couple problems. One is that when this thing is, there's slop here, so guys will suggest putting either making your own spring, which I'll probably have to do. You want this to be able to be compressible, because what happens is when that pin clicks into a second gear, it applies pressure until it is allowed to drive that pin forward. But the whole crux of the problem for why it's slipping out of second gear, if my camera will demonstrate it, is right here. This is made a whole bunch of metal, and it's got this like sort of wear spot. I don't know if my camera will focus on it there. It's got this wear spot right here, and this, I think it's called a pawl or a pawl. Anyway, it only partially engages when you shift into second, because this has got such a deep wear. It actually, you can just look and see when there's no air gap in here. It only engages like that far, and then because it's worn, it slips back into neutral. That spring that's over here, because it's stuck in second gear by the lever selector, wants it to stay in second gear, but it keeps doing this. It goes into second gear, powers it for a while, pops out. When the RPMs drop because the guy throttles back or whatever, it shifts back into second gear, powers it for a little bit, you raise the RPMs, slips out. The guy lowers the RPMs because he's frustrated. The pressure from this little shift spring pushes it back into second gear. Now you can tell from the wear mark here, this is capable of going all the way into 2, or the high gear, and this gear rides in the proper position. So it's capable of being fully engaged and not really wanting to slip out. However, you can see there's air in between here, or at least I can when I shine a light behind it, and it never gets a chance. You can see that light there now. It never gets a chance to go all the way into gear like this. I guess it would be like that. It never gets a chance to go into gear all the way like this, because this groove is so worn. It just sort of rests in this like kind of sort of half in, half out, sort of messed up state. So the fix is going to be, I guess these gears you can buy new, or you can try to find new, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this down so I've got a nice new proper flat surface. Put a little tiny chamfer or a little tiny ramp here, because you do want it to be able to lock into gear. So I'm going to put a little tiny recess here, but basically flatten that out. Flatten that out. This thing, oddly enough, is hardened, and it's got these little recesses, but this doesn't look beat up at all. There's no wear problems or marks or anything like that. There's guys online, and I've read about that they want to, they machine this out so that it travels further in and stuff like that. In this particular application with this scooter, I don't feel like that's a problem at all, because this thing will get all the way into the gear. this needs a stiffer spring, and this mating surface needs to be either cleaned up, or maybe I could buy a new gear, but I'm sure not going to buy a used one. Maybe I could buy a new one if there's a reman or something like that, but this is the problem. And that's part of why there's a ton of metal in this thing. I'm also going to replace the clutch pack because I'm pretty sure that's all beat to hell and probably worn out. Maybe, maybe not. That's the story. That's what it is. We'll see if I'm right, but I think I am. And I'll put it back together and we'll figure it out.